Listen, before we start, I really could use a drink. Could you get me a vodka soda with lemon in like a rocks glass? You know, it's like a shorter glass. Yeah. We don't have rocks glass? That's fine. Just whatever glass we have. Just vodka soda with lemon. We don't have lemons? Okay. Just give me thank you. Just give me the vodka soda. Yeah. No soda. We don't have soda? Okay. That's okay. Just vodka in a glass with ice. No ice. We don't have ice. Okay, just give me the vodka, just like a little shot of vodka. We're out of vodka? We never had vodka. We didn't have it at all today. So the whole thing was you couldn't have made it to begin with. Okay. All right, can you give me some water? No water. Really? There's no water on this floor? Okay. All right. Anything? Like a Diet Coke? No. All right. You know, why don't let's just start the show. What? There's no show. Welcome to On the Verge. I'm your host, Josh Topolsky, and you are a chatbot, so there's really no point in addressing you in any material way. We have a very cool, very exciting show for you today, kind of a special one. We had a chance to sit down with Ashton Kutcher, star of That 70s Show, 2.5 Men, and most recently the film Jobs, and talk about all sorts of stuff from startups to his love-hate affair with Twitter and, of course, the movie in which he portrays Steve Jobs. It's a really in-depth, very interesting conversation, and I'm excited to share it with you. So take a look, and we'll be right back. Ashton, thank you for being here, for joining me in Chicago.
Yeah.
We're getting sausages and deep dish pizza after this.
Yeah, we're going for it.
Are we? Your treat. You're making an investment in
I'll do it.
deep dish pizza?
I'm not.
You are.
Maybe.
All right, so tell me about, so obviously you're literally invested in the world of technology and in startups, but you're obviously like intellectually invested in it, right? Like you really care about this stuff, you're really interested in it. Where does that come from? I mean, what is the start for you? Like, were you a nerdy kid? Were you like a PC geek? Like where did this start?
Well, I went to school for biochemical engineering, and when I got to the University of Iowa School of Engineering, we started programming in Fortran, and this was in like 1997, and I was a kid who I didn't really grow up with email. I grew up like on a farm. We didn't really have, who are we going to email?
No, the cows.
And the first day, my professor was like, if you have any questions, just email me. And I'm like, oh man, I got to learn how to use email.
So you were in college and you were like,
I'm learning how to program in Fortran, but I didn't really even know how to use email at that point in time.
Right.
So there was like a real bind there. I had a professor in school that said, scientists discover problems, engineers solve them. And I really took that to heart, and like I wanted to grow up to be someone who solved problems. It took a little detour into acting, modeling, this thing and that thing, but always
just by accident.
Yeah, it just kind of worked out. So the notion of wanting to solve these problems always stayed with me, and then I've been kind of an early adopter of tech for a long time.
Once you figured out email.
I had like the Sidekick,
Oh, yeah?
I had the like Motorola two-way pager back in the day.
Yeah, push to talk and.
Yeah, like I really liked all of that stuff. I remember when I was promoting Dude, Where's My Car, I would go into AOL chat rooms and just start up Dude Suite conversations to like guerrilla promote the movie.
Really?
Yeah, and then
like you personally.
Yeah, I would just personally sit at home on my computer for like 2 hours a night, just starting Dude Suite arguments in chat rooms on AOL.
That's hilarious.
And then my company, I had a production company I started when I was 20 years old, and as we started to see buffering speeds on video get better and better and better to the point where it was almost streaming, we thought that it'd be a good idea to start moving into digital video. This is probably like 6.5 years ago or something. And we did a very early deal with AOL to program the AIM Instant Messenger and actually start to create original video content for the AIM Instant Messenger.
For the application.
For AIM. And because AIM was the way that everyone was chatting at the time.
No, I mean, I remember we used to use AIM back at Engadget when we were at AOL. We we started just in AIM. That's how we had all of our business conversations.
Yeah, and we would sit in the office and just like shoot stuff back and forth on AIM, and we were like, wow, this is really powerful.
Yeah.
And we thought that if we could embed video content units in AIM, we could start to make those video content units highly shareable inside of AIM.
Right.
Which ultimately, if you look at it now retrospectively, it would have been a lot like the way that people share content on Twitter or anything else.
Yeah, if it's natively part of it.
Right.
So that's where you started to think like this is not just something that I like or something that's cool or something that's useful, but this is kind of somewhere to put energy into.
Well, I was actually just using it as an adjunct to our production services business.
Right.
And then I progressively became more and more obsessed with it. And I started learning more and more and more and investing more time and energy. And then just started slowly making angel investments in consumer internet companies.
Right. And now here you are talking to me. So it's all...
Now I talk like I know what I'm talking about.
Exactly.
I still really don't.
I want to talk about Twitter. I want to talk about your relationship with Twitter. Mm-hmm. You were, for a long time, like the Twitter evangelist, right? You were like the guy, the loudest, the most public celebrity, or anybody really, using Twitter. You were like, everybody's got to be on Twitter. Twitter's happening. This is a thing that needs to happen.
Yeah.
And, you know, you had some moments on Twitter that were not great, obviously for you, and then you bailed. Like,
I didn't bail.
Well, but you're not running your account anymore.
Yeah, I am.
Are you?
I run the account.
I thought you handed it off to somebody.
No, I make sure before I post something that a group of people see it, so that I don't post anything recklessly.
Right.
Because I think at a certain point it gets like, you know, everybody wants forgiveness, but people don't really want to give it to other people. Right. And when you make mistakes publicly and you make them really loudly publicly.
Yeah, and they're like permanent.
Yeah, and what do I get from Twitter, right? I don't get anything, you know, I don't make money off it. It's not my livelihood. Right. So why would I do things that would jeopardize the things that are my livelihood to say something that I'm, you know, that I haphazardly see on TV and go, oh, and I have an opinion on it. Right. So all I do is now, before I post something, I say, hey, what do you think about this? To a couple people on my team that are usually with me all the time. Right. And then I post it. Well,
what did you get from it 2 years ago? I mean, what was different? You know, what was your relationship with it 2 years ago that changed?
I used to use it pretty personally, where I would actually ask a question about something, or like, what do you think about this, or what do you think about that? And the content that I posted didn't get blasted out on a mainstream system. It was a group of, you know, 500,000, 800,000, 1 million people that were actually interested and invested in what I thought or cared about what I was saying or what I was working on and wanted to give feedback. And that was an awesome feedback loop for me.
Right.
They took the retweet that used to be syntax. So you used to actually type in RT and then whatever the thing is, which actually had friction in it. So you had to copy, paste something, put in RT, and then repost it, right? And the friction that existed there caused people to only retweet things that had enough value that they were willing to put the work into doing the syntax to actually retweet it.
Right, and often people would, I mean, I still do that because I use an app that does the old school RT. Right. It's like you get to actually have commentary when you're retweeting
and you get to
somebody.
Add a comment,
you get to say, yeah, I agree with this, or I don't, or whatever.
So therefore, that participation in the system actually added value to whatever it was that you were reposting.
Right.
When they took away the mandatory, you know, syntax / you add value to this post, they actually inadvertently, I don't think anybody did it on purpose, they inadvertently degraded the value, the signal to noise value on the network.
That's really interesting. I mean, that's actually a really right-on observation, because it just becomes like you hit the button and then it's out there and it's in somebody else's feed who didn't even, like, they don't even know the context
and
of
the friction,
right?
The friction, while, you know, listen, engineers are trained to remove friction from systems. Sometimes the friction is valuable and you don't even realize it until it's changed and it's too late.
Right.
And I think that's what dynamically shifted it. Twitter by no means is in any kind of trouble, I don't think, but I think that they need to think heavily about that signal to noise ratio.
Because it's become less about the one-to-one interactions and more about the broadcasting. I mean, I think you're totally right. I think that, you know, for me, look, I run a media company, right? And so it's really great to be able to broadcast your stuff to as many people as possible. But you're looking for, which I think is rare for somebody in your position, a more personal interaction. I mean, the thing about it, this is my takeaway from watching you on Twitter over the last few years, is that you're looking for something that is this unfiltered, uncontrolled interaction with people who might be interested in you or that you might be interested in. That's like, you don't have to worry about email or the phone or whatever, and you have this like conversation, this very personal conversation.
I just move my discourse to other places. If I want like high value feedback against something now, I go to Quora. And
are you an investor in Quora?
I asked a question on Quora, yeah.
Okay.
But
Quora it's so, I mean, Quora to me is such a weird, like, so binary. It's like, ask a question, get responses. It's not really a conversation exactly.
It's not necessarily a conversation, but if you want high value feedback, it's a pretty good place to go.
Right. So you're just moving that stuff somewhere else.
Yeah, move it there, and then, you know, if I still post things on Twitter, I just don't post intimate things on Twitter because now my Twitter feed has become a broadcasting feed, and why am I don't want to display it out there. The other thing that has sort of, here's another inadvertent side effect of Twitter that most people probably don't realize. If I go to a restaurant anywhere in town, there'll be people outside the restaurant waiting for me outside the restaurant when I leave the restaurant. When I go, how'd you know I was here? They saw it on Twitter.
Yeah.
So people do like a search of my name on Twitter, and then they can find exactly where I am in any given place.
This is like Gawker Stalker fully realized.
That's a little like not awesome for people.
Yeah. All right. So I want to talk about. I know we don't have a ton of time. I want to get to this movie. You made a small film about a small topic, Jobs, about Steve Jobs. Mm-hmm. So I have to ask you, does it seem? I'm trying to think of the right way to phrase this. It's a pretty big kind of an egotistical move to say, I'm going to play Steve Jobs in a movie. And I think this is for anybody who plays like a great figure from history. It takes a certain amount of ego to be able to say, I can embody this guy or girl. What was your thinking? I mean, how did this come to be, and what was your thinking when you're like, okay, I'm going to be Steve Jobs in a movie? Like, how do you wrap your head around that?
Well, first, I think that it's I'm going to portray Steve Jobs in a movie.
Right.
Or I'm not going to be Steve Jobs. I can't be Steve Jobs. I'm just so far removed from having the capacity to be Steve Jobs.
But for the purposes of the movie, you've got to like become that character.
Well, so my decision to actually take the role was a tough one in that I have a lot of friends and colleagues that knew Steve or worked with Steve, that cared deeply about Steve. And, you know, I read the script, and the character of Steve in the script, you know, if you're going to tell a true story about someone, you have to tell the good things about them and the bad things about them. And in certain places and circumstances, some of the things that he did seemed extremely irrational. When I read it, I was like offended for him.
Right.
When I read the script. And so I had an immediate reaction of like, well, if I play this, are the people that I'm friends with that knew him going to be upset about it? You know, I'm trying to sort of balance two worlds.
Right.
And also wanting to defend the legacy of a person I really admired. And I sat there sort of imagining other people playing it that didn't have the insights that I had as to the fact that yes, he was a very aggressive boss, but yes, he had like a 98% approval rating from his employees. And I just imagined somebody else playing it and not actually taking the time to fully investigate him and who he was and how he was and why he was the way he was and what he had to sacrifice to actually make the great things that we take for granted every day. And almost felt compelled to like defensively play the role.
Right. Really?
Yeah. Like I want
to protect.
Like I want to make sure that it's it's like even if I screw it up and totally bomb it, I love that guy.
Right.
I love that guy.
Like you personally, really.
Yeah. And so I'd rather have someone that cared about him screw it up than someone who didn't.
That's a really, I mean, did not see that answer coming at all. It's a sort of kind of a bizarre reason to play a role.
So that was one. Two, it terrified me. And I found that most of the great things I've been able to accomplish in my life were things that terrified me. When I felt like I was way over my head on something, and I just went for it anyway. And the third thing is, it was kind of the perfect dovetail of my interest in my craft.
Right. Yeah, because how many chances, as a guy who's really into tech and investing in it and kind of living it when you're not doing your day job as an actor, how many opportunities will you get to play that kind of role?
Exactly.
Very few.
And then the last thing it aligned really closely with what I feel about the world right now, which is I think people need to build things. And I think that inspiring entrepreneurs to build really great things and persevere over so much challenge in the world, I think that that's what the world needs. And I wanted to tell a story about a guy who did that to hopefully inspire other entrepreneurs to go out and not just live in the world, but actually see what it is and try to build other things that make it the world that other people can live in.
So how hard was it to be Jobs in that movie? I mean, you got the walk. I mean, I got to tell you, you guys, you look really, really similar. I mean, my wife Laura who's also one of our editors, was like, oh, Ashton looks exactly like him. If you look at pictures of Steve Jobs when he's young and you put them side by side. In fact, I think I did the post when they announced that you were going to be in it, and there's a picture of you guys side by side, and it's uncanny. So you look alike. You got that walk down, that weird walk, which seems like, I don't even know how you do that, because it's it's funny, until I saw you in the movie, I kind of didn't think about it, but when I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly how Steve walked. The one thing that I was wondering, he had a really distinct voice, and you have a really distinct voice, and they're very different. Mm-hmm. Was there any consideration there where you thought, I need to change the way I sound for this, or I need to sound more like Steve?
There were really 3 steps to the research of Steve. The first thing was just like a data collection thing, where I was just read every book about him, and just anything I could get my hands on that was Steve, a video, an audio file, anything, just trying to understand, get the kind of whole story about the guy, because I think a lot of the stories that have been put out there about him don't always jive with each other, and you sort of go like, well, this is a little awkward compared to that, and why would he do that, and and trying to get that. And then the second phase of the research was trying to get to know why he made the decisions that he made, why he got angry, why he got sad, why he cried, why he laughed, trying to understand that. And I met with a ton of people that knew him pretty intimately to actually try to glean some understanding of that. Because more important at the end of the day than being exactly like him, from gesture, demeanor, walk, talk, look, is to actually capture that essence of like why he was doing the things that he was doing.
Right.
And then the last part is kind of like the window dressing, which is the walk and the talk and the things like that. And what I try to do is find footage of him, whether it was audio file footage or whether it was video footage or photographs, that were him not in a public setting. Because there were 2 versions of him, and I got this from a lot of friends of his that I talked to. There was the guy who went on stage and presented things, and the guy who went up and gave a speech. Right. And then there was the guy who was in the boardroom, and the guy who was working on a product, and a guy who was having an intimate conversation. And I tried to find like little tiny snippets of stuff where he wasn't aware that he was being recorded, or speeches that he didn't think other people were ultimately going to hear. Mm-hmm. So I could get a little bit more of who he and how he honestly was, and how he honestly walked, and how he honestly talked, and how he honestly gestured, and all those things. And that was a little bit, that was hard to find. But once I got a couple things down, like the way he spoke was a combination of, I think his father was from Wisconsin, and his mother was from Northern California. Mm. And so it's kind of a combination of those 2. Yeah. And while I don't have his exact voice, I can drop into it's a little bit more of an open speaking pattern with a little bit of a Midwestern Wisconsin accent. There's a little bit of that, but there's a little combination. He's got a tiny bit of a lisp that I picked up from listening to stuff. So I had like probably 20 hours. I have like a SoundCloud file that I posted. I actually just posted it yesterday. I posted a set of I think it's like 15 hours of Steve just talking, giving speeches and stuff.
Yeah. And
I would just listen to it all day long and then gradually start taking on some of the mannerisms of how he talked.
It's interesting because it's funny when he's on stage, he has almost a pleading quality to his voice, right? Where he really is, it's intense and it gets higher. And I have heard interviews with him where he was
a salesman. Like it's funny when you watch it, it's not that different when he would present something on stage. It's not that different than what, like it was like Ron Popeil or like one of those guys. Right. It was like, I mean, he was selling that product.
Yeah.
And he would take moments to think. He would use the word "and" a lot, and he would and he'd use that moment just to think about what he was going to say next.
Yeah, he was actually really slow. It's funny and I live blogged him a bunch of times, and one of the things you notice is that he speaks really slowly on stage. He gives you a lot of time.
Very slowly, very deliberate.
Exactly.
And he takes a lot of time to think about what he's going to say next.
Yeah, and each word sounds thoughtful.
Yeah.
It's like he's really in that moment thinking about the stuff that he's saying. That's a very interesting observation. I mean, I guess when you spend enough time studying him and you start to pick that up. I mean, I've spent years like watching him do his thing, and so I saw a lot of that, particularly the slow, that pacing of. It made it nice to do live blogs because when you're typing furiously and you want to capture every word that somebody says, he was one of the few guys that I knew when he talked, I'd always get most of it because he actually was really deliberate in his speaking.
Yeah. And then there were a lot of like nonverbal things that he did, where it was like when he would listen to people, he did this like thing where he just would kind of take in what they were saying, kind of, he would make you feel like, in an interview, he would make you feel like you were heard. Other times, maybe not so much.
All right, seriously, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. So there you have it. Very interesting guy, and you should definitely check out Jobs. Even if you've seen Pirates of Silicon Valley, they are different films. Now, we've got one other thing that I want to share with you, something I'm very excited about. Next week on The Verge, we're starting a new series called Small Empires with Alexis Ohanian. You may know Alexis as the co-founder of Reddit, but he's also a brilliant and hilarious and fantastic host. And he's going to be taking a look at startups in New York City. It's very cool, and we've got a clip from the first episode. No one's ever seen it. I haven't seen it, so anything could happen in it. Take a look at this, and we'll be right back.
Finding a doctor isn't all easy. Getting an appointment in a timely manner seems to be even more difficult than that. But there's an app for that.
There's an app for that.
There's an app for that.
There's now an app for that.
ZocDoc.
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 ZocDoc. ZocDoc.
ZocDoc.
ZocDoc.
ZocDoc. ZocDoc.
ZocDoc. ZocDoc. You know, the great thing about these apps is that they're in our phones, so they're always with us, kind of like our tissues.
Oh, right. So what is this, 3 years running, Crane's best place to work in New York? 3 years in a row we've made the Crane's best places to work list. This past year we were in the Fortune top 50 best places to work in America list, and second year in a row best places to work in healthcare. And so it's something that we really pride ourselves on. We're not lavishly putting air on chairs throughout our offices, etc. A lot of our furniture is refurbished, or we got it for free. And so it's not about like how much money we spend on the actual physical infrastructure of the space. It's really about what we do to enhance people's lives. Number 16, best small places to work in America from Fortune magazine. So
who are the other 15, man?
I don't know.
Next year,
exactly.
Crush them.
Yes.
And that is it. That's our show. I want to thank Ashton Kutcher, the crew of Small Empires, and Alexis Ohanian. Definitely tune into that show next week here on The Verge. And of course, I want to thank you, the human being that watched this. You didn't have to, you did it, and we created something magical together. That's our show for this week. We'll be back soon, and until then, there is no until then.